So anyway, but we really were talking about data and the difference between data and information. And one of the things that happens is you have over on one side of the fence, you've got these, we'll call them DBAs, database administrators. These are the keeper of the keys. They have that, you know, they'll talk about it, the database is in there, it's in the system and all that kind of fun stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean they know how to use that data to actually move the business forward. Then you have the folks who understand when we talk about customers, we mean this or anything along those lines. They don't know how to get to the data to actually do those sort of things. So that's kind of where we're coming from as far as putting this whole thing together.
And I'm getting more aggressive.
Okay, now go for it.
Yes. Okay. Most of us have experience either in IT or working with IT over our careers. And when you look back at the evolution of IT from somewhere in the 40s or whatever to present, sometimes it occurs to me, well, I know I'm still not sure where the UNIVAC and ENIAC and all that fit in, but I know they're out there. Yes, yes. But anyhow, it occurs to me that the whole purpose of IT from a certain perspective, a DBA's perspective, would be that it is all about enabling someone to gather information. And when you think about it, my understanding is the very first use for computers was by the Census Bureau. A lot of information they had to gather and do something with it. And when you look at all the advances in technology, pretty much every seminar that Simplex puts on, it's a different way of dealing with your data. So data, we work with it every day, but I don't think that we always look at it in the perspective of it's really the reason that we have all this complexity in our life. Our phones are so advanced now that they can do things that were unimaginable 10 years ago. They are computers that we carry around or get distracted with as we see fit. But the whole point that I want to make out of it is it's really the data that matters. Everything else is ancillary to it. Because we wouldn't have these systems, we wouldn't have these policies and procedures, we wouldn't need audited if we didn't have data that was available.
And so what we did, we kind of put this into 4 categories. And one is the whole data conundrum. There's just so much of it, so on and so forth. Then we also want to talk about information versus data, because there's a key difference here that especially if we're talking about the business folks, that cannot be overstated. It's just absolutely critical. And then there's the care and feeding. You know, we've all heard the guy go garbage in, garbage out. But there's also, once it's in there, you got to make sure it's going to stay healthy. And we'll talk about some of those things. And then finally, okay, fine, we know it's important, we know it's critical. How do we get stuff out? And that's kind of where we'll go by. And by the way, if you have any questions or anything along those lines, Doug would be happy to answer.
I will. One point, if you don't mind me interjecting again, Bob is a very accomplished DBA if you look at the credentials after his name, and I do an awful lot of work in formal database servers, Microsoft SQL Server. The thing is, please don't think that what we're about to talk about only pertains to if you have a big database server out there. It really doesn't. A database server is a good thing. It's a repository, or it can be viewed as a place to store your data in a structured manner, hopefully so that we can get all the advantages of the data back out. But this applies pretty much to any data that we use to manage our businesses.
Cool. And we talk about data. Doug already kind of spoiler alerted it by talking about how much data there is out there and systems and all that fun stuff. And any application that you have that stores things that you give it for retrieval later, whether it be customers, activities, you know, money, anything, that's a database. It's stored in there somehow. Okay. And yeah, we're supposed to make smart decisions. Wouldn't that be swell? I have to show my daughters that one. And then, you know, uninformed decisions. You know, if you're not taking advantage, if you're looking to expand your customer base, but you don't know where your customers are coming from, then you're guessing as far as where to best get them. Okay? We may say it's an informed guess, it's a qualified guess, it's a guess. Okay? And then, and here's it, collecting the data isn't enough. It is, and this is where you'll see some mindsets, and we'll probably both talk about some of our experience with this, where you have this, we're going to collect data. we're going to collect data about this or that. That's great. And then we're going to collect more. Because now we've got all this data. I keep trying to collect phone books because I tell my wife, then we'll have more phone numbers. She doesn't think that's a smart idea. So obviously she's, well, okay, she's a lousy choice in husband, so there's questionable intelligence to start with.
I have a comment I'd like to make as far as ramming the point home about data is growing exponentially. If we think just about this event right here today, you can envision how much data was actually generated just about this event or about yourselves as you got here today. If you think about nearly anything that we do, we place a phone call, we buy groceries, we get a ticket at the toll booth on the way over here, we register for an event, this is all data. It's not necessarily information until it goes through a process, but data is being accumulated at a pace that has never been seen before, and it's only going to continue.
Information versus data.
What's your problem?
Where's my
Problem.
Come with the,
Yeah.
you know, I think it's in my, as soon as he started doing the introduction, I remembered, I don't think I have that out already. So, to me, it's one of those, we get back to the phone book analogy. The phone book analogy is, it's data, all right? The name and number of a plumber who's near my house so they can fix the drain, that's information. Because I'm using it, I'm getting value out of it. So if I have a whole list of customers, I have a list of every customer that we've ever dealt with, both of them. Pause for laughter. That's data. But if I could see a list of customers within a 5-mile radius, or a list of customers who have purchased or made purchases or contracts or whatever within the past X period of time, now it's information because I'm actually sculpting with it. Okay?
So as an example of data versus information, here is something that actually is near and dear to database people like Bob and myself, or anyone else that does it. And what it is it's a bunch of values that we need to capture when we're monitoring a database server to make sure that your performance is keeping up to where it should be. The first time I saw this, I was completely overwhelmed, especially when Bob said, let me know which ones we're supposed to use. Okay, Bob was looking for the information, and he was giving me the data. So we had to go through a process to transform this huge amount of data, not really huge, it looks like it though, into usable information. And that's a quandary that all of us face on a regular basis.
Yep. So, again, how do we go from data to information? As I mentioned, you know, the phone book versus a specific plumber, a list of customers versus an instance of that. And really, it's the using the data that turns it into information. And then KPIs. Anybody know what KPI is for a business?
Keys per instance.
Key performance indicator. Right. Yeah, we're thinking of the geeky side. We're still on that side of the fence. No, that's cool. Key performance indicators. And this is one of the things for business owners especially. If you know, or if you're in charge of a specific subset of an organization, a department, a division, an application, one of the things that helps a lot is if there are key numbers that indicate how healthy the organization is. And if you know those numbers, how can you use your data to turn into the KPIs? So if, let's say, for example, Hattie's, okay? So what would be some KPIs for this particular location? Sales per month. Cool, because that way, now we've got an idea of economically how well we're doing. Cool.
Cost per month. Cost per month.
Again.
Number of seats.
Right.
Number of tables used and what hours.
Yeah. So we can start, and every one of those has a different perspective. So for example, I looked in daily traffic. If I wanted to see, you know, how many feet came into the place per day, that would give me an idea of staffing. What was the average sale per person? How many bought versus how many didn't? Now, depending upon my role and my interest, it may be critical for me to keep track of that information. It may not be. But some of that, for example, how many sales I made in a day or in a month, and the dollar amount, it's in my cash register. So we're entering that information there, or that we're entering that data there. So what's happening more and more is companies are developing dashboards. And the dashboards with a KPI is where they will have, here's our KPIs, and I'm going to either say they're healthy, they're not healthy, or they're kind of in between. And the nice thing on that is you've got a nice little metaphor that management can understand. Okay.
In case anyone's not familiar with the phrase, a dashboard is typically a one-page screen with graphs, and they color code little icons next to it. If your sales have met expectations, it would be green. If they're close, it'd be yellow, and if you're under, it would be red. Those kind of things. If you don't mind, could we have a little group example here? Does anyone know the process that our minds go through, or even ourselves, we don't have to think on the mind level, that we go through to turn our current data into information? For example, just Bob's phone book example. My mind immediately sees the phone book as data, not information. Does anyone know what it was Bob was thinking of that made that information for him?
Well, how he was going to use it.
True, true. Those are very good.
Sorting.
Yes, we're getting close. He used a phone book for his area. So the data was already called down from all phone numbers, all plumbers, all pizza people. And then what he didn't describe is that he flipped through the index and that he found it. So he went through some steps that we do routinely all the time that turn this blob of data into useful information. And that really is a big part of it, is summarizing large amounts of data to the smaller sets of data that our minds can really get a grip on. And that's what these dashboards are all about. They try to show you one row for your sales. How are they for the month? You know, how many employees do you have at this plant, etc.
And one challenging issue here is the human versus computer. Because for me to do that plumber search, I can, I'm just looking for somebody, okay, that'll work. But if you're talking about a computer, it has to be very specific in order to return data. Okay, so I'm doing a soft or a fuzzy search, meaning that, yeah, I'm looking for something approximately like this. Whereas computers have to be very rock solid, very specific, and all that fun stuff. Another challenge you get into is the definitions. And is that later on? Am I jumping ahead?
The definitions? Yes, I think so, but that's okay.
No, I'm going to shut up
It's
then.
kind of
And we're going to
free-form.
talk about that. It's going to be so cool.
Yes. Has anyone noticed what's going on with Google the last, I would say, 6 months? Google's trying to give us better information rather than raw data. First of all of us know that Google knows where we live, right? I don't mean the big they're spying on us thing. I mean, they can tell our zip code, whether we told them or not, because our DSL service or our cable modem is actually, the address of it is available out there, and they can tell that we're the greater Cleveland area. So a lot of the results that come up, for example, the weather, will be somewhat tailored to our geographic region. So again, the first step, they applied some type of slicer, a filter to it. We don't care about the weather in California today. We care about it in Hudson, Ohio. The next thing they do is immediately try to filter the results as you type each character. What could be more annoying? Except when it pops up what you're after, right there, but I keep typing and then it disappears. It's so frustrating. But again, they're applying filter criteria based upon what we're typing to reduce the amount of data to a much smaller, more manageable set. Cool. You'll see that's a key trend over and over and over.